Test J, section 2, question 17. It says hospital executive. What does this guy have to say? At a recent conference on nonprofit management, several computer experts maintained that the most significant threat faced by large institutions such as universities and hospitals is unauthorized access to confidential data. Okay, a couple things about this. One, we have a hospital executive talking, right? And here she says, look, I was at this conference and on nonprofit management. I guess universities and hospitals are generally nonprofit. That makes sense. Okay, so I was at this conference and these computer experts, several of them had this opinion, right? When people tell you what other people think, they could agree with them or they could disagree with them or maybe not say anything at all about them, but they're probably going to agree or disagree. That's why they're mentioning them. So at this point in the argument, I'm like, all right, this is what these computer experts said. Do you agree with them? Do you think that they're right or do you think that they're wrong? All right. So then, and these computer experts think that, hey, this is your biggest threat is these unauthorized people stealing your data, confidential data. Okay, whatever. In light of this testimony, we should make the protection of our clients' confidentiality our highest priority. Okay, well, the executive appears to agree with these experts and then says we should make the protection of our clients' confidentiality our highest priority. I think that makes sense if you assume a couple things. One, if you assume that the computer experts are right, and they could be wrong about this unauthorized access thing. But it's also strange because it seems like the computer experts are talking about computers, right? They're talking about computer security. And they're saying this is the biggest threat that you face. Yeah, when it comes to computers. But what about the threat of your business failing because you don't have enough customers, right? Or they're not a business, they're a nonprofit, but you know, you're just not getting, or your land bills are so expensive that you can't make your lease payments. And so your hospital is going to go the way of the dinosaur, right? Like this is it's a threat faced by your computers, but is it a threat faced? Is it the one you should make your highest priority? Maybe in the computer realm, but just overall, you might have other issues. Maybe the city council is voting on some measure that's going to restrict your ability to charge insurance companies something. I have no idea. But to say that this is the highest priority is questionable, right? The thing about the LSAT is you have to take what they say literally. So is this the highest priority? That's the question. Catherine, you have a question.
Yeah, so you mentioned that one of the flaws with this like paragraph could be that the experts aren't correct
Yep.
and
Yep.
saying that the threat is there. But I thought that like all the premises that were given in logical reasoning were supposed to assume that they're true. So
Yes.
like that's what
Yes.
messed me up here is I was like I thought that way and I was like, oh no, never mind. If it's saying that the experts say that, then that has to be right. But I don't know.
Okay. So,
Because it seems the
let,
premise.
let me, I'm just going to give an example. I apologize if this offends anybody, but it's just the idea that popped into my head. Okay. Nothing, all politicians are wrong. Let's just assume that for a half second. But imagine that our former president said something like, our former president said, it's a good idea to inject yourself with, what was it? Like chlorine or something like that, or that cleanser stuff to help you get rid of COVID.
Bleach.
Oh, bleach. Yeah, great. Just straight up bleach. Okay, great. Which we all have access to. So thank you. Okay, so there's a difference between claiming that, or what's the difference between these two statements? The former president said that we should use bleach to cure COVID, and bleach cures COVID.
Okay, so what I'm getting from that is like the fact is that the experts maintained that the most significant threat faced is unauthorized access. Like that's
Yeah,
the fact. Not that
that's
that's actually the data being unauthorized isn't the fact, but the fact that the experts said it.
That's it. That's the
You accept
fact you
that.
have to accept. So you can't come here and be like, they didn't say that. You'd be like, no, no, they did.
They did
That's,
say that.
yep.
Okay.
But that's all we can say. We
Yep.
can just say that they said that, but whether what they said is true is a totally different question. But if the LSAT cut, several computer experts maintained that. If we just deleted that and instead it said the most significant threat faced by large institutions, blah, 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 is this confidential data issue, then we'd be like, okay, that is the most significant threat. End of story.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yep. The question says the hospital executive's argument is most vulnerable to which one of the following objections? Okay, this is a flaw question yet again, which is not surprising because this is the most common question type, by the way, on the test. In logical reasoning. A, the argument confuses the causes of a problem with the appropriate solutions to that problem. This person is not confusing, like, the cause of the problem is people coming after us, and the solution to that problem is this other thing. And I'm actually confusing those two things. I think the solution to the problem is the people coming after us. No, this person isn't confusing causes and solutions. Like, oh, I'm mixed up about which one is which. So that's not happening here. Thus, this is wrong. B, the argument relies on the testimony of experts whose expertise is not shown to be sufficiently broad to support their general claim. Yes, I know it's kind of a wordy answer, but the experts have, for all we know, are they're computer experts. So their expertise is broad enough to cover computer problems. But when you turn around and say, okay, well, therefore, this is our highest priority, this is our biggest problem, and you ignore everything else, it's like, do you know about finances? Do you know about politics? Are you sure, computer expert, that this is the biggest problem facing that hospital? Maybe it's just the plumbing. They can't get the plumbing right, and everybody's getting sick from the bad plumbing. Like, that could be their biggest problem. You just don't know anything about it. So they have it. The argument has not shown that they have the expertise to make such a broad claim. That's going to be correct. C, the argument assumes that a correlation between two phenomena is evidence that one is the cause of the other. Okay. This is actually the flaw we saw in an earlier argument, right? This is LSAT's number 2 most common problem or flaw, and that's not happening here. We're not confusing what causes what or just from a correlation. So that's wrong. D, the argument draws a general conclusion about a group. Okay, maybe this person's hospital. About a group based on data about an unrepresentative sample of that group. No, there's no like samples here being mentioned. E, the argument infers that a property belongs to large institutions. Oh, I'm sorry. The argument infers that a property that belongs to large institutions belongs to all institutions. No, this conclusion was limited to this executive's hospital. So we aren't drawing any conclusions about everybody else. So this is wrong. All right, questions on that one? Yes, go ahead, Gabe.
Am I wrong? My first thought when I read this was computer experts having an opinion on like infrastructure security, because like computer expert has nothing to do if you know computers well, it doesn't mean you any knowledge on the security of like a large organization's infrastructure.
Oh, you mean like that are also like physical or something like that?
Right. Like when I see computer expert, I
Yeah.
think of
Yeah.
like my laptop on and off at Office Depot.
Yeah.
Very infrastructure expert.
I do. I think that is a specific instance of their lack of scope, right? Like, yeah, they're an expert in this particular domain, but what about a little bit beyond that? I don't know if that matters here though for the conclusion, because if you make the protection of your confidentiality your highest priority, that may be with computers or with infrastructure. I think the bigger problem here is that maybe confidentiality isn't the highest priority because there's something even far outside of that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Drawn.
When I first read the passage or the paragraph, my initial thought was just because something is the most significant threat, does that necessarily mean that it should be your highest priority? Would
Yeah, okay, that's another possible objection. Let's assume for a second that it is actually the most significant threat to your organization. That there are all other threats have been considered, right? Political, financial, whatever, structural, and you're like, okay, this is the most significant threat facing us. Then should something else be your highest priority? Maybe, but it's not like we're as angry about that as we are about other things, right? Going from biggest threat, if it actually is your biggest threat, to, oh, that means it's my highest priority. It is a jump, but how big of a jump is that, right? How many people are going to hear that and be like, well, that's bullshit, right? Like most people are like, it probably should be your highest priority.
so for future questions, if I see something similar to that, I shouldn't automatically assume that would be the flaw.
Yes. So here's the question that we're always. It's actually good that you recognize there's a jump in reasoning there, but the question always becomes, okay, how many people, and generally we want to think of a group of smart people. How many people in a large group of smart people are going to stand up and say, hey, that's not necessarily true, right? Like, yes, technically people be, well, okay, just because something's the biggest threat doesn't necessarily mean it should be your highest priority, but they're not going to die on it, right? They're not going to be like, they're going to be like, well, man, probably. I mean, that stands to reason. So the question is always, how unreasonable is the assumption compared to the other assumptions being made? It's mildly unreasonable, but the others are much more problematic.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Cool. Any other questions on this question? Okay.